The numbers danced for Liam Croft. They weren't just digits on a screen. They were a symphony of probability, a river of data whose currents he alone could navigate. Before him, on a monitor walled in black glass, the final lines of code for Project Chimera, compiled without a single error. A faint, rare smile touched his lips. It was done. Another masterpiece, maestro. Julian Thorne leaned against the doorframe of Liam's office, a crystal tumbler of amber whiskey already in his hand, despite the early hour. He was everything Liam was not. Expansive, effortlessly handsome, his charm a tangible force in the room. The scion of old money, he had provided the capital and the connections to launch Ethelred Capital. But he knew, and they both knew, that Liam's mind was the true asset. "It's ready," Liam said, his voice even. He never got excited. Excitement was a spike in cortisol, a distraction. The backtesting is flawless. A 34.7% return, annualized, with a sharp ratio north of 3. "It's going to work, Julian." Julian strode in, clapping a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Of course it is. It's your work." He peered at the screen, though Liam knew he understood perhaps a tenth of the complex algorithms scrolling past. "This is it, Liam. This is what makes us legends. Not just rich men. Legends." Liam's phone buzzed. A single word appeared on the screen. "Chloe. Home. Waiting. Don't be late. Thanks." A different kind of warmth, one he still hadn't learned to fully quantify, spread through him. Chloe Reed, his fiancée, the one variable in his life that had defied all his models. She was art to his science, passion to his logic. She had walked into his ordered world 5 years ago and introduced a beautiful, necessary chaos. "I have to go," Liam said, shutting down his systems with practiced efficiency. "Chloe has the final tasting for the wedding caterer." Julian laughed, a rich, booming sound. "Priorities! Go, appease your future wife. I'll hold down the fort. We'll pop the champagne on Chimera tomorrow." The drive to their penthouse apartment was a blur of city lights and quiet satisfaction. Liam's life was a perfect equation. Ethelred was on the cusp of unprecedented success. He was marrying the woman he loved. Every variable was accounted for, every outcome optimized. Chloe was waiting for him, a vision in a simple silk dress, her auburn hair catching the last of the evening sun. She kissed him, her lips tasting of wine and promise. "How's Julian?" she asked, leading him to the balcony where a platter of canapés from 3 different elite caterers was laid out. "Confident," Liam said. "As always." "He should be. He has you." She squeezed his hand. Her smile was radiant, but for a fraction of a second, Liam's trained eye caught a flicker in her gaze, a subtle tension around her eyes. He dismissed it. Stress over the wedding, the sheer volume of decisions. He, of all people, understood the strain of complex systems. "Try the truffle arancini," she said, popping one into his mouth. "It's the most expensive one. It should be the best, right?" Liam chewed, analyzing the flavor profile. "The texture is superior, but the saffron-infused risotto ball has a more complex finish." Chloe laughed, the tension he thought he saw gone entirely. "Only you, Liam. Only you." She looked out over the glittering skyline, her expression turning wistful. "All of this. It's real, isn't it? It's finally ours." "It was always real," he said, pulling her close. But as he held her, a cold, illogical shiver, a ghost in his machine, traced a path down his spine. He ignored it. It was an anomaly, an error in his own sensory input. In his perfect, calculated world, there was no room for ghosts. 1 week later, the ghosts became real. It began with a disruption in the pattern. The market opened, and Chimera initiated its first live trades. The numbers flowed, green and positive, exactly as predicted. Liam monitored it from his desk, a quiet hum of validation coursing through him. Then, Julian's office door opened. Instead of Julian, 2 men in severe, off-the-rack suits walked out. their presence a jarring dissonance in the curated opulence of Athelred. They were followed by 4 uniformed police officers. The office fell silent, the only sound, the frantic whisper of the trading floor, dying to a hush. "Liam Croft," the lead suit said, his voice flat and carrying. Liam stood, his mind racing through possibilities. A regulatory spot check? An issue with a client? His models were clean. His work was ethical. He had no fear of scrutiny. "I'm Liam Croft." The man stopped in front of his desk, flanked by the officers. He produced a badge and a folded document. "I'm Agent Miller, Securities and Exchange Commission. This is a warrant for your arrest and for the seizure of all records pertaining to Athelred Capital and Project Chimera." The words made no sense. They were syntactically correct, but their meaning was absurd. "Arrest? On what charges?" "Securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement of client funds to the tune of $74 million. A cold void opened in Liam's stomach. 74 million, a precise, terrifying number. "That's impossible," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "There must be a mistake." "There's no mistake, Mr. Croft," a new voice said. Julian emerged from his office, his face a mask of pained disappointment. Chloe was beside him, her eyes red-rimmed, her hand clutching Julian's arm for support. The sight was a physical blow, more shocking than the agent's words. "Julian, Chloe." Liam's logical mind scrambled, trying to process this new, catastrophic data. "What is this?" "I'm so sorry, Liam," Chloe whispered, her voice breaking. We didn't want to believe it." "Believe what?" Liam's composure cracked. "What are you talking about?" Julian looked at the agents, a gesture of helpless solidarity. "We found the discrepancies last night. Hidden accounts, shell companies in the Caymans. The transfers were buried deep in Chimera's code, designed to skim fractions of a cent from thousands of trades. But over the last 6 months, it added up." He shook his head, the picture of a betrayed friend. "I covered for you for as long as I could, Liam, but the board, the auditors, I had a fiduciary duty. The lies were so audacious, so perfectly constructed, that for a moment, Liam doubted his own sanity. He looked at Chloe, searching for the woman he loved, the woman who knew him better than anyone. She met his gaze for a second, then looked away, a fresh tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of grief, he realized with dawning horror. It was a performance. The pieces, cold and jagged, snapped into place. The flicker of tension in her eyes. Julian's constant pushing for more aggressive, less transparent strategies. Their shared, secretive conversations that he had dismissed as wedding planning. It was all a setup. They had used his own creation, Chimera, as the weapon to destroy him. They had built the trap with his own tools. "You," Liam breathed, his world collapsing inward, the edges turning to ice. Agent Miller stepped forward. "Liam Croft, you have the right to remain silent." As the agent recited the Miranda rights, as the cold metal of handcuffs clasped around his wrists, Liam didn't struggle. He didn't protest. He locked eyes with Julian, then with Chloe. The pain was there, a white-hot nova, but it was already being subsumed by something else, something far more dangerous. A profound, absolute coldness. He saw the faint, triumphant gleam in Julian's eyes, quickly hidden. He saw the way Chloe's shoulders relaxed slightly. The burden of her deception finally lifted. In that moment, Liam Croft, the genius of logic and probability, ceased to exist. In his place was something new, something patient, something that understood that revenge was not a crime of passion, but a long-term investment. It was a complex equation that required perfect data, flawless execution, and absolute emotional detachment. As they led him away in disgrace, past the staring eyes of his former colleagues, he began the first calculation. The variable was time. The objective was ruin. And he would not stop until the balance was zero. The courtroom was a study in controlled chaos, a system with a predictable, brutal outcome. Liam sat beside his court-appointed attorney, a harried man named Finley, who smelled of cheap coffee and defeat. Liam had dismissed him after their first meeting, choosing to represent his own logic against the emotional theater of the law. It was a miscalculation. He saw that now. The prosecution's case was a masterpiece of misdirection. They presented a narrative so clean, so compelling, that the scattered, complex truth stood no chance. Julian and Chloe were the stars of the show, a duet of devastation. Julian took the stand, impeccably dressed in a somber, expensive suit. He spoke of his deep, personal disappointment, his voice thick with a grief that didn't reach his eyes. He presented fabricated emails, showing a fictional Liam pressuring him to overlook risk parameters. He described late-night conversations where a stressed Liam had hinted at unconventional solutions to boost their returns. It was all plausible deniability, all carefully crafted to paint a picture of a genius cracking under pressure. But it was Chloe's testimony that was the killing blow. She took the stand, a vision of wounded grace. She wore a simple, elegant navy dress, her makeup subtle, designed to highlight her pallor and the faint shadows under her eyes. When the prosecutor gently asked her about Liam's state of mind in the months leading up to the arrest, she delivered her lines with Oscar-worthy precision. "He became so distant," she said, her voice a fragile thread. "Paranoid, almost. He was working all hours, and when he was home, he'd be on his laptop, shutting the screen when I walked in." A single, perfect tear escaped. "I thought it was the stress of the wedding, of Chimera. I tried to support him. I asked him what was wrong. He said he was making sure our future was secure, that we'd never have to worry about anything again." It was a lie wrapped in a partial truth. He had been working hard. He had wanted to secure their future. She had taken the bedrock of their shared life and weaponized it. She testified about a secret phone she found, about hearing him argue in hushed tones on calls she wasn't meant to hear. She presented a narrative of a man she no longer knew, a man capable of duplicity on a grand scale. She was the loyal fiancée, blindsided by the darkness in the man she loved. Liam watched her, his expression a mask of granite. He didn't interrupt, he didn't object. He simply observed, cataloging every micro-expression, every slight hesitation that betrayed the lie. He saw the way her fingers trembled, not from nerves, but from the adrenaline of the performance. He saw the fleeting glance she shared with Julian, a quick, silent signal of coordination. When it was his turn, he took the stand. He was calm, methodical. He explained the code of Project Chimera, line by line. He presented his own analysis, showing the mathematical impossibility of the prosecution's claims. He spoke of logic gates and algorithmic integrity. The jury's eyes glazed over. They didn't understand stochastic calculus or regression models. They understood a betrayed friend and a weeping fiancé. They understood a story. The verdict was a foregone conclusion, guilty on all counts. The judge, a weary man who had seen it all, peered down at him. "Liam Croft, you exploited a position of immense trust for personal greed. You have shown no remorse for your actions. The court sentences you to a term of no less than 7 years in a federal correctional institution." As the gavel fell, the finality of it was not a shock, but a data point. The experiment was over. The hypothesis that truth and logic would prevail had been proven catastrophically false. The new data was clear. The world ran on narratives, on emotional manipulation, on the ruthless application of power. They led him away in chains. As he passed the prosecution's table, he caught Chloe's eye. The tears were gone. For a split second, the mask slipped, and he saw not guilt, not triumph, but a profound, unsettling relief. She was free of him, free to live the life his crime had funded. In that look, the last flicker of Liam Croft, the betrayed man, died. The cold, empty space he had become was now fully occupied by a new consciousness, a single, driving purpose. He was no longer a prisoner being transported. He was a strategist, entering a new phase of operations. The prison would not be his cage. It would be his laboratory. The Danbury Federal Correctional Institution was a monument to controlled decay. The air smelled of disinfectant, sweat, and despair. For the first few weeks, Liam was a ghost, moving through the routines, eating the bland food, saying nothing. He was assessed, processed, and assigned a job in the prison library. A stroke of luck, he noted without feeling grateful. His mind, however, was a furnace. He replayed the betrayal on a loop, not with the anguish of a victim, but with the detached focus of a scientist studying a failed experiment. He identified his critical errors. Error 1. Trust as an unquantified variable. He had treated trust as a constant, not a fluctuating metric. He had failed to monitor it, to test its limits. Error 2. Underestimating ambition. He had modeled Chloe's and Julian's desires based on his own logical projections. He failed to account for the irrational, consuming nature of raw ambition. Error 3. The arrogance of innocence. He had believed the truth was a sufficient defense. He now knew truth was irrelevant, only perception mattered. He began to formulate a new plan. Not an escape plan, a campaign plan. Revenge, he decided, was an inverse takeover. He would gain control of the entity that had destroyed him, their lives, and liquidate its assets, their wealth, their status, their happiness. He needed intelligence. He needed tools. And he needed an ally. He found him in the prison library, hunched over a thick volume of tax law. Arthur Vance was in his late 50s, with a gaunt, intellectual face and eyes that held a permanent gleam of cynical intelligence. He was serving a 10-year stretch for a crime Liam knew he'd probably committed, embezzling from a multinational corporation that had itself been engaged in fraud. Arthur was the forensic accountant who had been hired to find the company's missing money, and had decided to reroute a small fortune for himself as a, quote, finder's fee. Liam had read his case file. Arthur was brilliant, meticulous, and held a grudge against the entire financial establishment. Liam started slowly, checking out books on advanced game theory and leaving them on the cart near Arthur's usual table. Arthur ignored them for a week, then finally took one. It was a start. Weeks later, Liam approached him directly. It was in the dusty philosophy aisle, far from the guards, casual sight. "Vance," Liam said, his voice low. Arthur looked up, wary. "Croft, the quant genius. Here to borrow Kant?" "Here to make a proposition," Liam said, his gaze unwavering. "I know who you are. I read the prospectus for the Meridian Global Audit. Your work was flawless. You didn't get caught because you were sloppy. You got caught because you were arrogant." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Is there a point to this character assessment?" "The point is, you were a tool used by a corrupt system, and when you tried to turn the tool against the user, they broke you." Liam leaned closer. "I was a tool, too. My name was Liam Croft. My fiancée and my best partner broke me and took my company. I know your story. Everyone does. So what? Misery loves company, but this library is already full." "I'm not miserable," Liam said, and the absolute coldness in his voice made Arthur pause. "I am repurposing. They took my company using a weapon I built. I am going to take their lives using the weapons they value most, money and secrets. I need a forensic accountant, the best." Arthur gave a dry, hacking laugh. "Look around, kid. We're in a cage. We have no money, no access, no power." "You're wrong," Liam said calmly. "We have time. We have intellect. And I have the blueprint of their entire operation. I know every algorithm, every backdoor, every financial vulnerability in Aethered Capital. I know my ex-fiancée's spending patterns, her psychological triggers, her social ambitions. I have 5 to 7 years to build a new weapon from the inside. I will get us the capital. I will get us the access. All I need is a partner who can follow a complex strategy and who hates the people who put us here as much as I do." He let the offer hang in the stale library air. It wasn't an emotional appeal, it was a business proposal. Arthur studied him for a long time, his sharp eyes assessing Liam's calm certainty. He saw past the inmate's uniform, past the recent notoriety. He saw the same cold, analytical engine that had built Aethelred. "What's the end game?" Arthur finally asked. "Total systemic collapse," Liam replied. "Not prison for them." "That's too quick. Too simple. I want them to stand in the ruins of everything they built with my stolen life and know, with absolute certainty, that I was the architect of its destruction. Then I walk away. A slow, grim smile spread across Arthur Vance's face. It was the first genuine expression Liam had seen in months. Architect of destruction, Arthur mused. I like that. All right, Croft, you've got your accountant. Let's start drafting the blueprints. The library became their war room. To any observer, they were just two inmates discussing books. In reality, they were building a shadow corporation. Liam's mind was the strategic engine. He dictated, from memory, the complete architecture of Project Chimera. It has a back door, Liam explained one afternoon, his voice a whisper as they reshelved legal texts, a failsafe I built in. A series of dormant commands that can only be activated by a specific 256-character cryptographic key. It's not in any of the code logs. Julian doesn't know it exists. Arthur's eyes lit up. A skeleton key, precisely. Once activated, it gives me root-level access to Aethelred's core trading operations. I can see everything. I can manipulate everything. That's Phase 3, Arthur said, scribbling invisible notes with his finger on a dusty table. The kill switch. We need Phases 1 and 2 first. We need intelligence and capital. Phase 1, intelligence. Using the prison's heavily monitored and slow email system, they began a careful campaign. Liam, under an approved alias for legal research, emailed a former low-level IT contractor at Aethelred, a man named Ben, who had always admired Liam and had been laid off by Julian after the takeover. The emails were innocuous, asking for public data archives for my defense case. Ben, sympathetic, began sending over troves of old server logs, public financial filings, and industry newsletters. From these dry documents, Arthur, the master forensic accountant, began to build a picture. He cross-referenced Aethelred's reported profits with market conditions, identifying subtle inconsistencies that suggested Julian was over-leveraging, taking on massive debt to maintain the illusion of continuous growth. He's pumping the valuation, Arthur muttered, his fingers tracing numbers in the margin of a legal pad. He's using your reputation to attract investors, but he doesn't have your skill to deliver the returns. It's a house of cards. He's just adding more cards. Meanwhile, Liam focused on Chloe. He had Arthur scour social media, using the library's computer during job skills training. They couldn't access her private accounts, but they could see public mentions, charity event photos, society page gossip. She had launched Chloe Reed Living, a high-end lifestyle brand. The initial buzz was strong, fueled by her notoriety as the victim of the Croft scandal. Look at this, Liam said, pointing to a news article about a launch party. The photo showed Chloe, radiant, holding a product, with Julian's arm possessively around her. They're a brand now. The triumphant survivors. Their narrative is their primary asset. Then that's what we target first, Arthur said. Phase 2, the seed. We need to plant the idea that their perfect world is flawed. Liam nodded. We start by separating them. We make Chloe feel financially independent and intellectually superior to Julian. And we make Julian feel that Chloe is a liability, a spendthrift who doesn't understand the pressures he's under. How do we do that from in here? Arthur asked, a skeptical eyebrow raised. We don't. We prepare the scripts. We identify the vectors. We will need proxies on the outside. But first, we need our own capital. Liam's gaze was distant, calculating. The small-scale market, prison commerce. He had been observing the prison's underground economy. Cigarettes, stamps, phone credits, favors. It was a primitive, inefficient market. Liam, using packs of ramen noodles as a base currency, began applying his quantitative skills. He identified arbitrage opportunities, trading coffee for stamps when a new batch of inmates arrived and needed to write letters, then trading stamps for phone credits when families were most likely to accept calls on weekends. He never held inventory for long. He was a market maker, a liquidity provider. Within a year, he controlled a significant, though invisible, portion of the prison's informal economy. He had a network of runners inmates who performed tasks for a share of the profits. He was no longer just an inmate, he was a silent power. He converted his ramen noodle profits into a more valuable currency: information and protection. He learned which guards were corrupt, which could be persuaded to look the other way for a price. He secured a safer, more private living space. He was building his operational base. One evening, sitting in his cell, he allowed himself a single private moment. He pulled a small, smuggled notebook from its hiding place. On the first page, he had drawn a simple three-phase diagram. The wedge, social/financial, separate and destabilize. Erode trust, the unraveling, reputation, public humiliation. Destroy their brand. The balance, total ruin, financial annihilation. The final, silent confession. He looked at the diagram, his face illuminated by the sliver of hallway light cutting through the cell door window. There was no hatred on his face, no vengeful glee. There was only the serene focus of a mathematician who has finally found the solution to a problem that has consumed him. He was no longer Liam Croft, the convict. He was the architect. And construction was underway. The electronic gate of Danbury FCI buzzed. A harsh, final note after 5 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Liam Croft stepped through, a duffel bag containing his life slung over one shoulder. The air outside was different, unfiltered, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the scent of damp earth. He didn't take a deep, dramatic breath. He simply noted the change in atmospheric composition, the expansion of his operational theater. He was thinner, harder. The softness of his former life had been whittled away, leaving only lean muscle and relentless intent. His eyes, once bright with the thrill of a complex equation, were now flat, absorbing light but reflecting nothing. He wore the cheap, state-issued clothes like a uniform. A beat-up sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver's side window rolled down, revealing Arthur Vance. He looked older, his hair more gray than brown, but the sharp, cynical intelligence in his eyes was undimmed. He'd been released 6 months prior, a model prisoner, thanks to Liam's discreet influence and his own impeccable behavior. "Need a ride?" Arthur asked, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Liam got in. The car was clean but smelled of old coffee and fast food. It was perfect. Anonymous. They drove in silence for several miles, the prison receding in the rearview mirror. It was Arthur who finally spoke. "The nest egg is secure, modest but operational, as per your instructions." Liam nodded. Before his release, Arthur had used a small portion of Liam's prison-earned capital, funneled through a compliant guard, to make a series of highly specific, low-stakes bets on long-shot sporting events. Liam, with access to historical data and a genius for probabilistic modeling, had identified statistical anomalies that bookmakers had missed. It wasn't enough to draw attention, but it was enough to seed their war chest. Just over $87,000. "Good," Liam said, his voice the same low, even tone he'd cultivated inside. "The first safe house? Brooklyn, a pre-war walk-up. Cash only, 6-month lease under a corporate shell I established. Untraceable." Arthur glanced at him. "It's not the Four Seasons." "It's a server rack," Liam replied, looking out at the passing suburbs. "Its only requirement is to function." The apartment was exactly as described, Spartan, dim, and smelling of dust and old wood. In the main room, however, was a sight that would have been alien in prison. 2 powerful laptop computers, a bank of monitors, and a sophisticated router, all humming quietly on a folding table. This was their command center. "The first priority is to establish full-spectrum surveillance," Liam said, not bothering to unpack his bag. "I need eyes and ears. Everything on Chloe and Julian. Their digital footprint, their financial movements, their daily routines." Arthur was already booting up a system. "I've laid the groundwork. I have trackers on their primary credit cards, both corporate and personal. I've cloned their phone SIMs, a simple social engineering hack on the carrier. We can see texts, call logs. Their email is more secure, but not impenetrable." For the next 48 hours, they barely slept. Data flowed across the screens. Liam watched, his mind absorbing the patterns of their lives. He saw Julian, his face more lined, his gestures more frantic, moving through a world of high-stakes meetings and late nights at the Ethelred offices. The pressure was evident. The company was still profitable, but Arthur's initial assessment from prison was correct. The margins were thinning, sustained by debt and reputation. And then there was Chloe. Liam watched her on a high-resolution monitor, a live feed from a telephoto lens Arthur had set up in an apartment across the street from their new, multi-million-dollar Tribeca penthouse. She was curating a vase of white orchids on a vast marble countertop. She looked polished, prosperous, and utterly absorbed in the minutiae of her own luxury. Her brand, Chloe Reed Living, had a boutique on Madison Avenue. The narrative of the resilient survivor had been a powerful marketing tool. He felt nothing looking at her. No longing, no anger. She was a data set, a target. Phase 1 begins now, Liam said, turning to Arthur. The wedge. We need to create friction. We start with finances. He explained the plan, his words precise and cold. Julian is over-leveraged. He's sensitive to any financial pressure. Chloe's business is a vanity project, but it's her identity. We will make it seem like Julian's financial instability is threatening her success, and simultaneously make her success seem like a fluke that undermines his own acumen. The first move was a whisper in the market. Liam, using a cascade of offshore trading accounts Arthur had established, began a subtle, surgical assault on Ethelred's positions. He didn't short the stock. That was too obvious, too direct. Instead, he used his intimate knowledge of their algorithmic trading patterns to create echoes. He would place a series of small, seemingly unrelated sell orders in correlated markets just milliseconds before Ethelred's own large trades were executed. The effect was to shave fractions of a percentage point off their fill price. It was death by 1,000 cuts, a slow leak they would attribute to market volatility or, ideally, Julian's own slipping competence. A week later, Liam monitored a conference call Julian held with major investors. He listened through the cloned phone line. A period of adjustment, Julian was saying, his voice strained. The macro environment is challenging, but Ethelred's core strategies remain sound. A fund manager interrupted, his tone sharp. The Q3 returns are below projection, Julian. These micro inefficiencies you're citing are costing us. We invested in the Croft algorithm. We're not seeing it. Liam allowed himself a micron of satisfaction. The seed was planted. Simultaneously, he turned his attention to Chloe. He needed to bolster her, to make her feel independently powerful. He had Arthur create a sophisticated bot network to artificially inflate engagement on Chloe Reed Living's social media posts. Positive comments, shares, likes, all from accounts that appeared to be genuine, high-net-worth individuals. Then he orchestrated a lucky break. He identified a struggling but talented freelance writer who frequently covered the luxury goods sector. Using an anonymous email account, he fed her a tip, a fabricated but plausible story about a rival lifestyle brand using unsustainable sourcing. The resulting exposé sent shockwaves through the small industry, and Chloe's brand, positioned as the authentic alternative, saw a sudden, significant spike in positive press and sales. That evening, Liam watched the live feed. Julian came home looking exhausted. Chloe was radiant, holding up her tablet. Look, we're trending. Sales are up 40% this week alone. I told you this brand had legs. Julian forced a smile, pouring himself a large scotch. That's great, Chloe, really. He didn't look at the tablet. It's just been a hellish day at the office. The board is asking questions. About what? Chloe's smile faded, replaced by a hint of defensiveness. I thought you said everything was fine. It is fine, Julian snapped, his patience worn thin. It's just complicated. You wouldn't understand the pressure. The room went silent. Chloe's face tightened. The wedge, thin as a razor blade, had been inserted. Liam escalated. Phase 1 required deepening the fissure. He needed to weaponize their secrets. He had Arthur dive deep into the financials of Chloe Reed Living. While it was currently successful, its initial funding was a mystery the SEC had never bothered to unravel. focused as they were on Liam's crimes. "It's here," Arthur said triumphantly one night, pointing at a complex web of transactions on his screen. The initial seed capital for Chloe's brand, $2 million. It was funneled from a Aethelred executive bonus pool, authorized by Julian 3 months after you were convicted. He disguised it as a strategic marketing investment in a shell company that just happened to be wholly owned by Chloe. Liam studied the data. It was a clear breach of fiduciary duty. Julian had used client money to bankroll his girlfriend's business. "This is the leverage," Liam said, "but we don't expose it." "Not yet. We use it to breed paranoia." His next move was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. He had Arthur craft 2 perfectly forged documents. The first was an internal Aethelred memo, supposedly from a concerned board member, questioning the, quote, opaque allocation of the Q2 executive bonus pool and specifically highlighting the $2 million marketing expenditure. The second was an email, ostensibly from a private investigator hired by the same board member, sent to Julian's private account. The email's subject was Chloe Reed funding, preliminary findings. The body was vague but menacing. The trail is clearer than anticipated. Awaiting your instructions before proceeding to Phase 2, Liam didn't send the memo to the board. He had it accidentally delivered to Chloe's personal email, spoofed to look like a misdirected internal Aethelred communication. He watched the feed that evening. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, her tablet on her lap. She opened the email. Liam saw her face go pale. She read the forged memo, her hand flying to her mouth. Then, she clicked on the attached PI email. He saw the blood drain from her face completely. She looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and betrayal, just as Julian walked in. "What's wrong?" Julian asked, his tone weary. You used company money?" Chloe's voice was a shaky whisper. "For my brand?" Julian froze. "What are you talking about?" "This!" she shrieked, thrusting the tablet at him. "They're investigating you." "A board member hired a PI. You lied to me. You told me it was your own money." Julian scanned the documents, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "This is a fake. This isn't real. Chloe, who sent this to you?" "Does it matter?" she cried, tears of rage now. "Is it true? Did you steal that money?" "I didn't steal it. I allocated it." "It was an investment," he shouted back, his own fear making him angry. "I did it for you. For us." "Don't you dare put this on me," she screamed. "You've put my business at risk. My reputation. They'll say I was in on it. They'll say I'm just like him." The mention of Liam hung in the air, a ghost they both felt. Julian stared at her, his jaw clenched. The trust between them, the foundation of their shared crime, was now cracked. "I have to deal with this," he said coldly, turning and walking out of the room, pulling out his phone. Chloe collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing, but her tears were not for Julian. They were for herself. For the perfect world she had built, now showing its first, terrifying fault lines. In the dark Brooklyn apartment, Liam watched it all. He saw the fracture, saw the suspicion and fear take root. He didn't smile. He made a note on his digital plan. Phase 1. The wedge. Status. Operational. Initiate Phase 2 preparations. The cold, calculated machinery of his revenge was now fully operational, and its gears were beginning to turn with silent, devastating efficiency. The silence in the Tribeca penthouse was no longer comfortable. It was a thin veneer over a chasm of suspicion. The argument about the $2 million had been a seismic event, and the aftershocks were constant. Julian spent more nights at the office, claiming firefighting emergencies with investors. Chloe buried herself in her brand, the artificial success Liam had engineered now feeling like her only solid ground. Liam monitored it all from the Brooklyn Command Center. The data streams were his lifeblood. He watched Julian's blood pressure medication prescription be refilled early. He read Chloe's increasingly anxious texts to her interior designer about creating a more serene, calming space. They were reacting exactly as his models predicted. The emotional variables were falling into line. Phase 1 is achieving critical mass, Liam stated, his eyes on a screen showing Julian's frantic trading activity as he tried to plug the leaks Liam was invisibly creating. It's time to introduce Phase 2, the unraveling. We move from private friction to public humiliation. Arthur looked up from his own monitor, where he was tracing the web of shell companies Julian had used to fund Chloe's brand. The reputation hit. Where do we start? With the foundation of their public image. Their narrative as the wronged, virtuous couple, Liam said. We prove it was all a performance. We target Chloe first. Her brand is her vulnerability. We destroy the authenticity she's selling. He had Arthur compile a dossier, not of the financial crime, that was for later, but of a more visceral, publicly understandable sin, hypocrisy. Using the access granted by the cloned Sims, Arthur dug into Chloe's private communications. He found what Liam knew he would, a treasure trove of disdain. There were texts to a friend mocking the sheep who bought her overpriced linen napkins and artisanal candles. There were emails to her manufacturer in Bangladesh, pressuring them to lower costs despite their complaints about meeting fair wage agreements, with one particularly damning line, "Just get it done." They don't care about the hands that make it, only the story I tell. Most damning of all, Arthur uncovered the original, unedited drafts of her heartfelt social media posts about resilience and rebuilding. They were cold, strategic documents, with notes in the margins like, "Pivot tone here to wounded but strong. Use the Finding My Light hashtag." "This is gold," Arthur muttered, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Pure, 24-karat hypocrisy." "We don't release it ourselves," Liam instructed. "We feed it to an amplifier." He identified the perfect vector, an infamous, merciless gossip blogger named Cassandra Glass, whose specialty was tearing down the carefully constructed facades of the wealthy and famous. She was a known entity, her credibility built on a mountain of scorched earth exposés. Liam composed an email from a secure, anonymous server. He attached the most incriminating documents, the text mocking her customers, the email about the Bangladeshi factory, and the cynical marketing notes. The body of the email was simple, factual, and devastating. The attached might be of interest. The narrative of Chloe Reed, survivor and authentic lifestyle guru, appears to be a carefully constructed fiction designed to separate her loyal followers from their money. The truth is somewhat less inspiring. He hit send. The detonation was swift and brutal. Cassandra Glass published the story at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, the digital equivalent of a tactical nuclear strike. The headline was savage. "The Gilded Lie, How Chloe Reed Built an Empire on Your Tears." By 9 a.m., the story was trending nationally. The comments on Chloe Reed Living's social media feeds turned from adoration to vitriol. Hashtag Chloe Reed Lying began to trend. By noon, major news outlets had picked up the story, adding a layer of legitimate journalism to the blogger's salaciousness. Liam watched the live feed. Chloe was pacing in her living room, phone pressed to her ear, her face a mask of panic. He could see her brand, the source of her newfound confidence and independence, crumbling in real time. Her phone rang incessantly. Reporters, business partners, lawyers. When Julian came home that evening, he didn't go to comfort her. He stood in the doorway of the living room, his face pale. "Did you know about this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Know about what?" Chloe sobbed. "That some bitch is lying about me? Are they lies, Chloe?" Julian shot back, holding up his phone displaying the Cassandra Glass article. "Because this reads like a confession. This is a disaster. The board is already on my back about the financials, and now this? The stink of this is all over me too. You're worried about you?" Chloe shrieked, hurling a crystal vase from the coffee table. It shattered against the wall near his head. "My business is being destroyed! Our lives are being destroyed!" "Your business!" Julian roared, finally losing his composure. "Your lies! I told you that branding was a risk! I told you to keep a lower profile!" But you had to be the goddamn queen of Madison Avenue! The fight escalated, a symphony of shattered glass and shredded trust. Liam watched, his expression unchanged. He was noting the data, the specific insults they used, the vulnerabilities they targeted in each other. It was all useful for the final phase. The public humiliation of Chloe had a cascading effect, just as Liam had calculated. It pulled the thread on Julian's carefully wound tapestry of lies. Spooked by the negative press surrounding the couple, a major investor initiated a quiet, independent audit of Aethelred's books. The auditor, hired for his thoroughness, quickly stumbled upon the anomalous $2 million marketing expenditure Arthur had uncovered. He dug deeper, and he found more. Small, irregular transfers to other shell companies, all leading back to Julian. They were not as large as the sum given to Chloe, but they were numerous. A pattern of siphoning funds for personal luxuries, a private jet membership, payments to a Swiss watchmaker, investments in a vineyard in Tuscany. The auditor took his findings not to Julian, but directly to the SEC. Liam saw the storm coming before Julian did. He monitored the SEC's internal scheduling system, a backdoor Arthur had established, and saw a meeting titled Aethelred Capital Emergency Inquiry appear on the calendar of the same prosecutor who had put Liam away. "It's happening," Arthur said, a rare note of excitement in his voice. "They're moving on him." "Phase 3, Liam said, his voice flat. "The balance. It's time for Chimera to awaken." He moved to the primary laptop, the one isolated from the internet, containing only the code for Project Chimera and the connection to his hidden back door. His fingers flew across the keyboard, calling up the dormant command line. He input the 256-character cryptographic key from memory without hesitation. A single prompt appeared on the black screen. "Greater than Chimera awaits command." Liam didn't hesitate. He uploaded a pre-written script. It was a thing of malicious beauty. It would lie in wait within Aethelred's trading servers for exactly 24 hours. Then, at 9:45 a.m., the moment the New York Stock Exchange opened, it would execute. It would first place a series of massive, leveraged buy orders for a volatile tech stock, artificially inflating its price by over 300% in under 60 seconds. Then, milliseconds later, it would trigger a cascade of sell orders from dozens of Aethelred's own accounts, crashing the stock and triggering automatic stop losses across the entire market. The script would then immediately liquidate Aethelred's most valuable long-term holdings to cover the catastrophic losses, wiping out the firm's capital in a self-cannibalizing spiral. The entire process would take less than 3 minutes. To any investigator, it would look like a perfect storm, a reckless algorithm combined with extreme market volatility and catastrophic risk management by Julian Thorne. Liam closed the connection. The trigger is set. 24 hours. He and Arthur spent the next day in silence, monitoring the preparations for the SEC inquiry, watching the final frantic movements of their targets. Chloe was holed up in the penthouse, her brand in ruins. Julian was in his office, surrounded by lawyers, desperately trying to shore up his defenses, unaware that the ground was already crumbling beneath his feet. The next morning, at 9:45 a.m., Liam and Arthur watched the financial news on one screen, while data from Aethelred's servers streamed across another. It began exactly as scripted. "We're seeing incredible, unprecedented volatility in shares of Axiom Corp," a bewildered news anchor reported. "The stock has skyrocketed, up over 200% in under a minute. This is chaos." On the data screen, Liam watched as Chimera's buy orders executed. Then, the switch. The sell orders flooded the market. The line representing Axiom's stock price, which had been a near vertical climb, became a sheer cliff face, plummeting into the abyss. On the news, alerts started flashing. "We have a flash crash. Axiom is in freefall, and it's dragging the entire tech sector with it. Reports are coming in of massive, forced liquidations." Liam switched the feed to Aethelred's internal communications channel. It was pandemonium. "We're being liquidated. The system is selling everything. I can't override it. Thorne's authorization is locked out. My God, the losses. We're gone. We're completely gone." He saw Julian's name appear in the chat, a single frantic message. What is happening? Then, nothing. The server log showed the system administratively shutting down. Aethelred Capital was functionally dead, bankrupt, its funds vaporized. An hour later, the live feed from the penthouse showed Julian stumbling through the door, ashen-faced. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. Chloe was on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring at a wall. "It's gone," Julian whispered, his voice hollow. "Everything. It's all gone." Before Chloe could even respond, the intercom buzzed. A doorman's voice, nervous, announced, "Mr. Thorne, there are gentlemen from the Securities and Exchange Commission here to see you." Liam watched as the last vestiges of color drained from Julian's face. He looked at Chloe, a silent, desperate plea for something. Understanding? Support? He found only her own frozen terror. He turned and walked slowly back towards the door, his shoulders slumped. A king stepping down from a throne that had just turned to dust. In the Brooklyn apartment, Arthur let out a long, slow breath. "It's done." Liam continued to watch the screen, his gaze fixed on Chloe, now alone in the vast, silent, and soon-to-be repossessed penthouse. The ruins of their lives were complete. "Not quite," Liam said softly. "There's one final piece of the equation, the confession." The collapse was a public spectacle. News vans camped outside the Tribeca Tower. Headlines screamed of the Aethelred annihilation and the fall of the Golden Couple. Julian, arrested by the SEC on charges of fraud and embezzlement, was released on a staggering bail, his assets frozen, his name a synonym for financial hubris. Chloe, evicted from the penthouse, moved into a soulless short-term rental, her brand bankrupt, her face a magnet for paparazzi and public scorn. They were ruined, but they were not yet broken, not fully. Liam's work required the final, psychological closure. They needed to understand the totality of their defeat, to see the architect in the shadows. He chose the location with cold precision, the abandoned, dust-sheeted offices of Aethelred Capital. The lease hadn't yet been formally terminated, and Arthur's digital keys, copied long ago, still worked. It was the perfect stage, the place where their betrayal began, where his old life had ended. He sent the messages from a one-time burner phone, texts that were simple, stark, and impossible to ignore. To Julian, the architect of your ruin awaits. Aethelred offices. Come alone if you want to know why. To Chloe, the truth about the last 5 years. Aethelred offices. Come and see. He knew their desperation, their consuming need for answers, would override their caution. Liam stood in the center of the dark, cavernous trading floor. Monitors were dark, chairs were overturned, and a fine layer of dust had already begun to settle, a shroud over the corpse of his former dream. He wore dark, functional clothing, a ghost in his own mausoleum. Julian arrived first, his face haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He stopped short when he saw Liam, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You," he breathed. "They let you out. Good behavior," Liam said, his voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "What is this, Liam? Some pathetic attempt to gloat?" Julian tried to summon his old arrogance, but it came out as a weak sneer. "Gloating is an emotional response. This is a debriefing." Before Julian could reply, a hesitant click of heels announced Chloe's arrival. She stood at the entrance, wrapped in a cheap trench coat, her face pale and devoid of its usual artful makeup. She looked small, hollowed out. Her eyes darted from the ruined office to Julian, then to Liam. The sight of him seemed to suck the remaining air from the room. "Liam?" Her voice was a thread. "What? What are you doing here?" "Finishing the equation," he said, his gaze encompassing them both. "You're here for the solution." Julian laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You did this? You think you're some mastermind? You're a convicted felon? You crashed my company?" "Your company?" Liam's tone was lethally calm. "It was built on my intellect. You were just the suit who stole the blueprints." And I didn't crash it. I triggered the failsafe I built into Chimera, the one you never knew existed. You were never the pilot, Julian. You were just a passenger in a machine I designed. I simply entered the command to self-destruct. The color drained from Julian's face. The sheer, chilling logic of it was more terrifying than any act of violence. Chloe stared, comprehension dawning with horrifying slowness. The blog. The leaked documents. That was you? Every piece of it, Liam confirmed, turning his flat gaze to her. The market pressure on Aethelred. The lucky break for your brand. The forged memo about the $2 million. The leaked emails to Cassandra Glass. It was all a coordinated campaign. Phase 1, the wedge. Phase 2, the unraveling. Phase 3, the balance. He took a slow step forward, and they instinctively recoiled. You were a variable, Chloe. An ambitious, emotionally driven variable. I calculated your need for independent success, your vanity, your fear. I fed your brand to make you feel powerful away from Julian. I showed you his theft to make you fear him. I gave you everything you thought you wanted, just so I could take it all away and show you the strings. He turned to Julian. And you, the ruthless, entitled variable. I applied financial pressure where you were most vulnerable. I made you look incompetent in front of your board. I made your partners seem like a liability. I orchestrated every moment of the pressure that made you desperate, that made you careless. I led the SEC right to you. You ruined us? Chloe whispered, tears of shock and fury now streaming down her face. You destroyed our lives. No, Liam corrected, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying with absolute clarity. You destroyed Liam Croft's life. I simply liquidated the assets you built with the capital you stole from him. I balanced the ledger. The finality in his voice was absolute. There was no rage, no hatred, just the serene certainty of a problem solved. Julian found his voice a broken thing. Why? For revenge? Revenge is a motive for the emotional. This was quality control. You presented a flawed product, a life built on a lie. I recalled it. I terminated it. He looked at them, these two broken people, standing in the ruins of everything they had coveted. He felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just the quiet hum of a process completed. It's over, Liam said. The equation is solved. The balance is zero. He didn't say another word. He simply turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He left them there, amidst the dust and the ghosts, with the full, crushing weight of their own destruction, and the chilling knowledge that it had been delivered not by a monster, but by a machine of pure, calculated logic. The cold air outside was a shock, but a welcome one. It felt like coolant flushing through a system. Arthur was waiting in the car a block away, the engine running. It's done, Liam said, sliding into the passenger seat. Arthur glanced at him, then back at the road, pulling away from the curb. And nothing. The objective was achieved. They drove in silence back to the Brooklyn safe house. The monitors were dark, the equipment already being packed away into nondescript cases. Their work was finished. Over the next week, they executed their exit strategy. The apartment was cleaned, leaving no forensic trace. The digital equipment was wiped, then physically destroyed. Its components scattered across different landfill sites. The shell companies were dissolved. The offshore accounts were closed, the funds transferred through a final, untraceable maze before being split between them. They met for the last time at a busy, anonymous bus station. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and fast food. "What will you do?" Arthur asked. He had a new passport in his pocket, a new identity, and a considerable sum of money. For the first time, he looked like a man with a future. "The same as you," Liam replied. "Disappear. The skills remain. The perspective has changed." Arthur nodded. There was no need for sentimental farewells. They had been colleagues in a grim, necessary project. The project was complete. "Good luck, Liam." Liam simply nodded. "Arthur." He watched Arthur Vance merge into the crowd and vanish. Then he turned and walked in the opposite direction. He had no destination in mind, no grand plan for happiness. He had no identity left, not the old Liam Croft, and not the vengeful architect. He was a blank slate. A system that had successfully executed its primary function and was now available for new programming. He found a small, cash-only room in a nondescript part of the city. He sat by the window watching the rain streak the glass. He thought of Chloe and Julian. They would likely face prison. They would certainly face a lifetime of poverty and infamy. Their names would be footnotes in financial scandal sheets. He felt no emotion. The coldness that had sustained him was now simply his state of being. He had not found peace, but he had found something more valuable to a mind like his: resolution. The chaotic, painful variables of betrayal had been identified, isolated, and neutralized. The system was stable. He was free, not from the law or from his past, but from the corrosive power of what they had done to him. They had no hold over him anymore. He had quantified their crime, and he had exacted a payment of precisely equal measure. In the quiet of the room, with the sound of the rain as the only data stream, Liam Croft closed his eyes. The past was a closed file. The future was an empty command line, awaiting its first, new input. That concludes this tale. If you want to be here for the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time.